Hello, everyone. I'm Alyssa Ryan.
And I'm Cassie Means. We both serve on the board of directors at Horizons at Sacred Heart University and have the honor of co-chairing today's luncheon.
Of course, we are disappointed that we are not all together once again. Balancing the challenges of COVID-19 and our commitment to gathering for our annual luncheon to raise essential funds for Horizons' important work was no easy task. But thanks to our planning committee and all of our generous sponsors, here we all are, from near and far, celebrating all that we have accomplished and paving the way for future programs that serve Horizons' extraordinary children.
As Horizons at SHU celebrates its 10th anniversary, we think it's only fitting that we raise our glasses. Whatever it is that you're drinking, perhaps the delicious iced tea that came with our lunches, and make a toast to the dedicated staff and 168 students who benefit from Horizons at SHU. Regardless of the challenges of the past 18 months, they have shown up ready to teach, learn, and grow. We also want to celebrate each of you who make our work possible. We always say there's no Horizons at SHU without you, and we mean it. Cheers.
For those of you who have today's boxed lunch, we hope that you enjoyed the delicious meal. In your bags, there is an insert that outlines our program so you can follow along. To reduce the risk of tech calamities, parts of our program have been pre-recorded, but that shouldn't minimize how inspiring today will be, especially as we are delighted to be joined by our keynote speaker, Dr. Ken Pugh, who is a leader in COVID slide research and how the pandemic has impacted learning. Thank you, Dr. Pugh, for joining us today. We are all very interested to hear your remarks, not only for the impact on our Horizons students, but also our own children.
Before we get underway, I wanted to take a moment to let you know that we are hoping today's lunch will raise significant funds for our essential programs. The program card in your bags has some information on the many ways you can donate. You can text the word lunch21 to 41444, mail a check using the envelope in your bag, use the QR code on the materials, or you can log on to www.sacredheart.edu/Horizons Lunch to make your gift right now. No amount is too small or too big to make a significant impact on the deserving children of Bridgeport that we serve.
Now that those housekeeping items are taken care of, we are thrilled to introduce Ashley Nechayev, Horizons Academic Director, to get our program underway.
Thank you, Alyssa and Cassie. We are grateful for your great help, leadership, and enthusiasm in coordinating today's event. And thanks to all of the attendees out there, we are delighted and grateful that you have joined us today. It is with great pleasure that I have the opportunity to introduce Dr. Ken Pugh, President and Director of Research, Haskins Laboratories, Yale University, University of Connecticut, where he is dedicated to the investigation of the biological basis of language. He also holds academic appointments as a professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Connecticut and as an associate professor in the Department of Linguistics at Yale University and as an associate professor, Department of Diagnostic Radiology at Yale University School of Medicine. Dr. Pugh also directs the Yale Reading Center and is a member of the Board of Visitors for the Learning Research and Development Center at the University of Pittsburgh, and a member of the Scientific Advisory Council for the Child Mind Institute in New York. His research program falls primarily into two broad domains: cognitive neuroscience and psycholinguistics. As you can see, he is a leading expert in the field, and what excites me is hearing how his research impacts our students, especially because when we welcomed our students this summer, we witnessed firsthand the impacts of COVID-19 on the social, emotional, and academic needs of our community. At the conclusion of his remarks, Dr. Pugh will take some questions, so please feel free to submit a question through the chat feature on this webinar, and I will pose the questions to Dr. Pugh. Without further ado, I present Dr. Ken Pugh.
First, okay, and then share screen, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, folks, we're just dealing with a little bit of technology. Griffin, or can you see my screen? or whoever can speak?
Oh, looks like they can see it.
Oh, they can see it. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So I think we're all set then.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. My colleague is helping me. If you can hear me, my colleague Craig is helping me to set this up. We had a little bit of tech difficulties the other day, but I'm glad that you can see me and hear me. Let me begin by just saying it's a thrill and an honor to be here with you today. As I've gotten to know more about the Horizons program, I'm really becoming a very big fan. I believe in your mission, and I'm hoping that the Haskins community and the Haskins Global Literacy Hub in particular can really find good ways to support and connect this important mission. What I'm going to do, I am going to speak a little bit about the COVID situation and how we're approaching it through the Global Literacy Hub community. But I also am going to provide a little bit of an overview of how we approach the understanding of reading and the reading brain, and then how that translates into the way we focus on remediating difficulties, and especially dealing with the kinds of difficulties that arise in the pandemic. So let me just begin with some slides that will give you background on our approach and on our organization. First of all, speech. We begin with sort of broad principles. Haskins Laboratories is in its 87th year. We're formally affiliated with both Yale and University of Connecticut. We're an interdisciplinary community, and our mission is to understand the biology of human communication in all its forms. And we take special interest in the relation between oral language and written language. And just to begin with, just to sort of raise your background on this, think about it for a moment. We're sort of wired by evolution to talk and listen, but not to read and write. So speech is a biologic specialization with a lot of brain real estate that gets devoted to it. Speech is mastered naturally in almost all people without direct instruction. But reading is a relatively recent cultural invention. It's only been around for a few thousand years, and it is difficult and involves significant challenges and requires good instruction, as you know well. And at a neurologic level, this just tells us that really there's no brain specialization for reading. Reading is in some sense an exercise in taking populations of neurons that do language and vision and attention and giving them a new function. And it requires good teaching, and it requires good environment, especially can be impacted in its early stages by things like the COVID shutdown. We have a long history at Haskins Laboratories of looking at the dependence of oral language and written language on one another. Just briefly, we focus very much on how the human brain and the vocal tract and the auditory system communicates through speaking and listening. And we've had much research on the brain basis of speech for many years. Somewhere in the 1960s, and those of you familiar with reading will know this, the Haskins researchers began to ask the question, what is it that makes some children struggle with reading and others succeed? And when we look early on, we ask the question, is it their attention or their visual acuity, or is it their language skills, and particularly phonologic skills? It turns out that the single best predictor of reading in its earliest stages is the ability to operate on the speech structures of the language. So we sort of connect speech research and early reading. We also do considerable work, I won't go into today, on how reading develops across all the world's languages. We have satellite laboratories in a number of countries, and we're interested in what's universal about reading, even in languages like Spanish, for example, which is very phonetic, versus English, which has many irregularities that children need to cope with. And we study this at multiple levels, but in recent years, progressively more at the level of the brain basis. And the reason we focus on brain imaging and brain research as well as cognitive studies and educational studies, is because when we can peer into the underlying neurocircuits, we get exquisite sensitivity to individual differences. We can begin to understand the heterogeneity, the diversity of learners by understanding connections in the brain. And this is the reason why we go after this kind of topic. This is why I'm giving you this overview. And ultimately, this is what we relate to the ways we think about recovering from the events like the pandemic. In order to take the basic science and connect it to education and to the global problems, including the problems of the pandemic, we've created an entity called the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, which is wonderfully directed by Ben Powers of the Southport School, who is with us here today. And it involves a large number of researchers from a number of countries focused on the broad vision of improving literacy development across cultures, languages, and continents. And in order to really do this, we focus on improving access to research-based practices, so research to classroom partnerships, improved researcher practitioner engagement. We can learn from one another, the researchers and the educators. Each can be the teacher of the others, and we take that very seriously. And improving basic science, including cognitive neuroscience, of language and literacy from its earliest stages. We have a wonderful international community. I'm not sure how many of the names you can see here, but if you can see them, many of them will be familiar to those of you in the literacy world. Mark Seidenberg and Chuck Perfetti, Fumiko Heft, who co-founded the hub with me, Marianne Wolf, Maureen Lovett, Dick Aslin, Elena Grigorenko, geneticist, and many other folks who've come together from their different disciplines to consider how to improve literacy in the global arena. And we are really focused in terms of the research components on looking at literacy as it extends back to the beginnings of life. Many of you probably know that early language development and risk for language development can and does impact literacy later on. And there are two kinds of factors, of course, that can be influencing later early language development and later literacy. One is the environment, access to resources, poverty, etc. And the others are more congenital, genetics, neurobiology that are associated with specific learning disabilities. And in reality and in complex real-world situations, the environment and the genetics interact in complex ways, inducing risk for reading problems, which ultimately can spiral over the course of education, as most of you know, to poor educational and psychosocial outcomes, as well as economic and everything else. And so the focus of our research really is to understand this birth to 10 trajectory very deeply at the cognitive and neurologic and genetic levels, to develop better prediction and prevention on the one hand, and to develop brain-based scalable instruction on the other. So there are three major questions that I usually try to allude to in a talk like this. And they're really sort of pretty straightforward. One, without all the technical brain details. One, these are the three big questions. How do typically developing learners build a neurocircuit for reading? In other words, what does the brain have to do in order to make reading fluent and easy? And when it goes well, what happens? Number two, how and importantly, why does this neurodevelopmental trajectory differ in atypically developing learners? Whether that atypicality comes from environment, genetics, or some combination. And third, and of course the $64,000 question, the big one, the one that matters to education is, with appropriate remediation, knowing what works for whom and why, with this deeper understanding of the differences, can we modify these neurobiologic differences and induce better reading outcomes? And we use a variety of neuroimaging tools and techniques to map the human brain. But let me step back for a second and let's just consider what it means to become literate at the age of 5 or 6 or 7. A child who is has had adequate preschool will know many thousands of words by eye and by by ear. They know the spoken form, and they know a lot about the semantics, if you can see my cursor, and the phonology of language. And this involves many left hemisphere regions that become specialized for the phonology and the semantics, the morphology, and the syntax. There's a whole lot of language cortex here that is already in place when a child learns to read. But what they need to do is they need to make a new code, of course. They need to learn that all of this stuff that they're wired for, goes deep into our human capacity, that hinges on these left hemisphere circuits, can be represented by squiggly lines, by orthography. And so building this orthography means creating connections between visual areas and language areas. And our research over the years, and again, this becomes important as we consider what to do in the classroom, especially during difficult times. Our research over the years suggests something very intuitive, but very profound, that reading development depends almost entirely on the early reading brain being able to use the machinery for talking and listening for reading and writing. In other words, we need to co-opt our evolutionary machinery on this left hemisphere circuits. Again, don't worry, there's no quiz on the neurobiology tomorrow. The key point, the intuitive point, is that the brain has all this machinery for talking and listening, and the key to good reading is being able to use it. Indeed, in this study that I have on the screen, we're doing a longitudinal tracking of a very large number of children in the US who were tracked from the age of 6, when they were just acquiring reading, to the 3rd and 4th grade. And the single best predictor of reading in the 3rd and 4th grade that comes from our study of the brain is not what the brain does when it reads or listens, but crucially, whether it uses the same neurons to do both jobs. And so this is what's being shown here, and this is a very profound study because it also suggests commonsensically that what we need to be doing in education or remediation is strengthening these print speech bindings. For what it's worth, and I can't resist showing a little bit of cross-language work because I'm a pocket protector research nerd, we have been able to show that skilled reading in vastly different writing systems, as in this PNAS study, Spanish, English, Hebrew, and even Mandarin Chinese, show a very similar pattern of good reading relying on the ability to reorganize the language system for literate code. In other words, to use the machinery of talking and listening for reading and writing. And of course, when we get to reading disability, whatever its origins, which affects fluent and accurate word reading and is associated with phonologic difficulties and is unrelated to how smart you are and is best thought of as a continuum. The fundamental presentation of reading difficulties, as educators at this meeting today know, is that the child early on has difficulty with the binding of phonology and orthography, if you will, of graphemes and phonemes. This inability to bind these representations leads to, not surprisingly, a breakdown in the development of these left hemisphere fluent reading circuits. We see this across languages. We see that in these left hemisphere regions shown in the lower portion of the slide, atypical brain activation. Our work for years has examined all of this. Reduced connectivity, which is the way in which one part of the brain talks to another, problems in learning and consolidation, and even differences in the structure of the brain. Now, knowing that the brain looks different, my first two questions were, how does the brain develop efficient reading circuits? Well, it takes print and speech and binds them and requires instruction that supports that binding and involves left hemisphere reorganization. The second question was, how does it look different in children who struggle? And as I said, we see that those bindings fail to occur and children end up using compensatory processes. So the $64,000 question right now, of course, is if we can get to the right process at the right age, can we normalize those differences? And so what we essentially are talking about with remediation and intervention is strengthening the print-speech binding. We've worked with a number of programs. Right now, we're working very closely with Maureen Lovett's amazing project out of Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto called the Empower Program, which really binds all of these representations together. And so the big question is, does it change the brain? And I wouldn't be saying this to you if I didn't have a lot of data on this. What you can see here in children with severe reading delays is the lack of activity on the upper screen for in the left perisylvian, the left language tissue. But with effective intervention, we see increases. In a study we did some years ago with Benita Blackman's extraordinary treatment out of Syracuse University and with the Shawitzes at Yale, we also found that these effects can not only change the brain in the short term, but can impact long-term reading trajectories for the good. So in summary, for all of this at least, there is growing evidence that treatment can have a strong effect on these differences in brain circuits, both functionally and structurally. But here's to the last point before we get to the COVID. So if you do a treatment study with children who look very similar in their reading difficulties, if it's a good treatment, many kids will respond, but not all. And the question is, why don't some kids respond and others do? And that points to differences that probably live more deeply in the connections of the brain. That children may look similar in the way they read or struggle with reading, but for very different neurobiologic reasons. And so we're actively engaged in one study with UConn, Yale, and Haskins, an NIH study. We're examining treatment outcomes over a long period of time. And what we're seeing is that the brain is giving us some indicators of what needs to be in place if you're going to respond to a conventional treatment. And here's the big one for us. If you don't respond, if you are different, even though you look similar on testing, perhaps the differences lie in connections that we're now only beginning to understand. As we understand the brain connections, and this is kind of, your grandmother could predict this, as we understand the diversity of the brain, we can teach to its fragility. We can strengthen these connections. And so whether children are in an optimal environment or whether they are in a COVID shutdown, we want to be able to use this extremely sensitive information to understand cognition, reading behavior. I want to also mention briefly that doing treatment work is best done when we can bring it into the natural world. And we're very excited about ongoing work that we're doing right now with the AIM Academy and the Windward School from Philly and New York, respectively, where we bring the neuroscience into the school and where we work closely with educators and learn from them so that we can say what works for whom and why. So let me come to the last part of these remarks, and that is what is the current situation with COVID? We were watching this for the last 2 years in the Haskins Global Literacy Hub, and we've been actively involved in trying to do things like professional development, online resource libraries, and a study with education technology that I'll show you in a minute. But the first question is, was there going to be learning loss? And now that we're in 2021, there's a growing body of evidence, including this study out of Stanford, that suggests that during the key part of the shutdown, even in relatively structured schools, there were losses in reading development, in words per minute gains that were expected. And even though there was some improvement in the fall, it hasn't caught up. This is always what happens. If you fall behind, it's very hard to catch up. And this has been seen not only in a high-performing school, but much worse in younger children in underperforming schools. And so we are seeing this sort of bad news scenario, but it's not surprising. And there's now papers coming out from different countries that we're tracking that again suggest that this breakdown is happening in multiple languages and cultures. So in order to address this, I want to just talk about two things we can or did do, and then where we need to go next in my last minute or so. Well, one project we did, which it was kind of straightforward, was funded by, to my colleague Fumiko Heft and I, by the National Science Foundation, and much to our joy, the Tremaine Foundation as well, where we simply asked the obvious: if we can get kids who are stuck at home some support in reading through education technology, can we mitigate this expected slide? And so that study began last year and is now coming to conclusion. I don't have final data yet, but I can show you a couple of things that are encouraging. One, we are seeing that the children playing the reading learning games at home were able to get particular gains, especially on phonologically relevant units like the rhyme units. And on average, there was no evidence of a slide in this group, but importantly, we could actually predict whether the child went down, stayed the same, or improved by the ways in which they engaged with this technology. So EdTech is not a panacea for life and for education. It is very helpful in under-resourced parts of the world. It is something we need to use in conjunction with good teaching, but it does look like it had some benefit here. And I want to end with this last slide, which is, we can't go back now and do EdTech or anything else with the COVID shutdown. Kids are coming back to school. And here's what I want to end with this remark. Think about it for a minute. If you look at any classroom in a best of all possible years, there's tremendous heterogeneity, diversity of learners, and teachers have to teach to that diversity. Well, after COVID, that diversity is going to be amplified considerably. And so it becomes important, and the Haskins Global Literacy Hub is now laser focused on how we can prepare the classroom for the heterogeneity so that we get kids back to where they need to be to benefit from curriculum. This involves linking EdTech, professional development for teacher, and of course, our brain-informed research protocols. So I'm taking up my minutes, and I want to thank you for your attention. And of course, I hope that you will have some questions for me. Thank you very much. And now I am, oh my God, my my technology colleague is not here. Can you see me?
We can see you. Thank you so much for your presentation. We are now going to open it up to questions from our audience. The questions, again, can be submitted through the chat, and I will pose them to Dr. Pugh. Dr. Pugh, it appears that we do have a question. One of our guests is wondering, does old-fashioned phonics study lead to better binding between phonology and orthography?
The answer is, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm kind of obnoxious. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so not that phonics is reading or enough, of course. You all, common sense tells us that we have to have the basement built before we can build the second edition and the third stories, which is, of course, comprehension. We don't do as well, by the way, as a field, for those of you who really want to know where the feet of clay are. We're not doing as well as we should be in comprehension, in transitioning from learning to read to reading to learn. And as I mentioned in my remarks, some children don't benefit from phonics. And so we're hoping and we're exploring, as I showed you, who those children are at a deep level, and how we can take advantage of understanding where the fragile points are in brain to help those children. But in general, if you do not strengthen and reinforce the cross-modal bindings of orthography and phonology, you do not build that what we call a modal system, where no longer do you do speech or reading, you do one thing. And therefore your reading is able to become fluent like you're talking and listening, because it uses the same real estate. And so the phonics is absolutely crucial, both in the classroom, as my colleague Sue Brady showed for many years, even typically developing kids benefit from direct instruction, but also it is absolutely mandatory for children who fall behind. And so, sorry for the forceful answer, but the research from the brain, which is cool, although we still have a long way to go to be able to fully exploit an understanding of biology to the classroom, but we're getting closer. We need to be humble and careful, but at the same time, we can see very clearly that when you look at a first grader and you ask what's going to predict their reading in third grade, it's actually the degree to which they've made those findings. It's quite exciting. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that was
Ashley, are there others?
There are. We have another guest that is wondering, based on your research, what do you think out-of-school time programs like Horizons can do to be proactive when planning educational enrichment for next summer?
That's a terrific question. And let me be clear, the way that we roll in the Haskins Global Literacy Hub is that we have pocket protectors like me doing the neurocognition, and then we have experts like Ben Powers and other people in the room today who think about how to translate this into practice. And so I would prefer ultimately that they answer this. And I want to say one thing to all of the people at the luncheon. We like visitors and we like emails. So contact us at the Hub. We've developed a whole bunch of online resources for teachers and parents that address some of these questions. However, just to sort of give some answer, since you always should give some answer, even if you're a neuro guy, we are thinking that some combination of the ed tech practice can be beneficial. That's what the NSF Tremaine study is at least suggesting, right? Rather provocatively. And I think that in prepping for enrichment next summer, we need to pay attention to this. But guys, one thing I didn't mention, because I had short remarks here, even though you may feel like it started yesterday. One thing I did not mention, this is very important. The other major impact of the COVID shutdown is, of course, not just academic loss, but socio-emotional challenges, anxiety, increased. I'm, as they mentioned, I'm on the Scientific Advisory Council for the Child Mind Institute in New York, an amazing place. And they're seeing really elevated anxiety. And anxiety is comorbid with reading difficulties, math difficulties, but importantly, it can create a state in the brain where it's very difficult to consolidate the learning. So I am telling people that I love, my family and friends, that you must pay attention to the child's socio-emotional well-being as much as their academic, not just through things like exercise, but also, quite frankly, to be open to things like mindfulness and other programs that are now being developed for the school. I have one project we're starting with the Yale Child Study Center, our partners, where we're looking at mindfulness in kids with learning difficulties. But preparing for the enrichment means getting the academic skills back where they need to be. This will be helped by the technology and by professional development for teachers, so they know how to deal with this heterogeneity, this diversity, and also by getting kids happier again, to put it sort of, simplistically. And I think we need to spend a lot of time focused on that, to be perfectly honest.
Thank you so much. So there's another question that was emailed in, and then we have another question that was just texted in on the chat. This person wants to know, you mentioned that there is a lot of focus in your treatment on binding speech and print. This person is wondering, is there a window that treatment is most effective? You do most of your research with children, but is there a point at which remediation doesn't work as well?
Oh, I love this. But you can hear me and see me, right? I'm smiling. I love this question. In speech, I am a professor, so you've got to stop me soon. But in speech, as you may know, in infancy, and we have infant research going on here all the time at Haskins, you know that there are these sensitive or critical periods where you really need to get language stimulation. If you're deaf, for example, sign language will do just fine, but you need to stimulate these systems early in order to develop normal language later on. With regard to literacy, there is much debate and a lot of unknowns. But you can imagine we're researching this very question, which is why I'm smiling. We are doing this in a study that involves under-resourced areas in South America and other work in Africa, where there are significant numbers of kids who are actually not getting literacy until older ages. The question is, that's a good one, and the answer is a work in progress. But there is at least some indication from some research, and it's a, we're scientists, so we have to be very careful that this is a work in progress, suggesting that there may not be such critical periods. There's great work out of Stan DeHaan's group in France, for example, showing that even adult literate learning literacy for the first time as an adult, can produce some of the patterns that support fluent reading in terms of neurocognition. But it's harder, and it gets harder the older you are. So an area of active research, and I have an NIH project that's going to be exploring this for the next 5 years, and that is whether or not adolescent children need something different if they've gotten pretty far along the path, a not so good path, of course, and not been able to make these bindings. But our indication suggests that that the brain is remarkably plastic in a good sense, and that it is capable of making these connections far longer than I might have guessed 20 years ago when I started this research. So sorry, that's a long answer.
That's incredible. And we look forward to seeing the data that you produced from your study. We have time for one last fast question. So our last question is, have you made correlation with the level of reading and the higher use of EMF?
So this is embarrassing, but please remind me what an EMF is.
I'm waiting for our guest to remind us.
Are we talking about electromagnetic fields? Like cell phones? I'm sorry. Is that what this is about? Because I just, yes. They said yes. Thank you. Drusilla, thank you. I know of no data at all. I'm very involved in many advisory panels. And of course I do a ton of work for NIH not in my day job, so to speak. I'm not aware of any data on this correlation, and frankly, as you probably know, Drusilla, this is still an open and active research area where some people are making claims one way or the other that go way beyond where the data is. And so I think that we need to be circumspect here with regard to this impact. Common sense says we should be thinking about it, perhaps, but the data so far is limited across many domains of cognition and socio-emotional learning. However, I know of no data, just to your question specifically, I know of no data on reading. It will be looked at. It should be looked at, but it has not yet been so. That was my short answer, by the way, Ashley.
You did a wonderful job. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your clear passion for this area with us today. Thank you to our audience for their thoughtful questions. I'm actually now going to turn it over to Brad Evans for the presentation of the Pioneer Award.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brad Evans, and I have the privilege of serving as a co-chair of the Board of Directors of Horizons at Sacred Heart University. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank Dr. Pugh for joining us today and for his informative and insightful comments. No matter who you are or what you do, everyone has an interest in understanding the impact that the coronavirus is having on the education of our children. Dr. Pugh, your comments serve to underscore the importance of what we do at Horizons. I would also like to thank our Luncheon co-chairs, Alyssa Ryan and Cassie Means, and all of the members of our talented and hardworking Luncheon Committee for making today's luncheon possible. Also, I'd like to thank Heather Trotta and Alessandra Rose of Wise Oak for their help in planning and organizing today's event. I am honored to be presenting this year's Horizons at SHU's Pioneer Award. As many of you know, Horizons could not operate without the support of its many volunteers. Because of this wonderful spirit of volunteerism that exists at Horizons, we established the Pioneer Award in 2018 to acknowledge and recognize at least one volunteer each year. Today, we would like to recognize my dear friend, Frank Morey. Frank has had a distinguished career in the fashion industry, having served as CEO of Donna Karan and Anne Klein. Frank currently is the president and director of Takiho, a private investment firm headquartered in New York City. He also serves on the board of directors of Dillard's Department Store. Our mutual friend and fellow board member, Tom Graham, asked Frank to join the Horizons board 4 years ago because he knew Frank was dedicated to helping others. Frank has not let us down. Frank has served as a co-chair of our investment committee and also serves on our governance committee. He is a thought leader on our board and is a key participant in every major decision this organization undertakes. Indeed, his leadership and concern for others and his great sense of humor have been an example for many, including me. I feel very fortunate to serve on the Horizons board with Frank, but mostly I am grateful to be able to call Frank my friend. Frank, my dear friend, you are most deserving of this recognition, and I am delighted to present you with this 2021 Horizons Pioneer Award.
Oh, lovely. Wow, lovely. Thank you.
For those of you who cannot see this, this is a picture of some of our students, each holding a letter that spells out the word thankful. Frank, we are all thankful for everything you do for Horizons at Sacred Heart.
I'm truly honored and somewhat overwhelmed by receiving this award. There are so many potential deserved recipients. I count myself very lucky to have received it. I can't help but forget 4 years ago when Tommy Graham asked me to meet at breakfast with you, Brad, and we did, and you explained the mission of Horizons at Sacred Heart, how long you had been involved, what was involved with being a member of the board, and more important than anything, when I heard and understood the mission of Horizons at Sacred Heart, I knew this was an organization that I wanted to be involved with. During the 4 years that I've been on the board, I remain taken back almost every day by the achievements of Ashley and Amanda and all the teachers as well as administrators. I'd like to also give a shout out, if you will, to Alessandra and Heather, who've been very much involved and very important in our efforts to raise money to support Horizons. And I still think that education is the way forward for all of us and all of those that aren't as privileged as we are. We live in a community that is close by Bridgeport, obviously, and Bridgeport is one of the most underserved communities in the state of Connecticut when it comes to education. It is that gap between resources that are available in Bridgeport and the great or wonderful program that Ashley and her colleagues, Ashley and Amanda and her colleagues, have put together for Horizons for Sacred Heart, where these students, or a large group of students, get to go to Horizons at Sacred Heart during every summer at which time the team works diligently to prevent the so-called academic slide year to year. They've been very successful in doing that. And during the winter months, while school's actually in session, these children go to school in Bridgeport, as I said. During the winter months, the team and Horizons has a regular program where the students are monitored. They continue to get the support, advice, and counsel of our great team. And I have seen in person how successful that program has been. My hat, this award should really be off to Ashley, Amanda, and the team of teachers that so diligently and let's leave it at that, diligently and in great spirit, provide these services to these children. The results are dramatic. I implore you, if you have not, to come and visit the program, to go to one of the open houses, to somehow, and I hope my receipt of this award somehow inspires you to get to know more about Horizons at Sacred Heart and the important and successful work it is doing. Being just a small part of that, I'm truly thankful and honored to receive this award. And before I end, I want to ask each of you to consider Horizons in your philanthropic thoughts, because as we say at the program, there is no Horizons at SHU without you. It's very important if we are to continue the hard work that our staff puts in and the success they achieve, if they are continually supported by folks like you. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Brad.
Congratulations, Frank. You are truly a pioneer, and we are grateful for all you do for Horizons. Frank is just one of the countless examples of who we mean when we say, there is no Horizons at SHU without you. Our work isn't possible without each of you, and your being here today with us is so meaningful. Thank you. Over the summer, the Horizons at SHU's diverse staff and faculty team was extremely busy. We had 4 weeks of robust summer program serving 164 children from the Bridgeport community. All of this was achieved despite the challenges of COVID-19 because of our dedicated team and our supported families. As you can imagine and heard from Dr. Pugh, the kids we serve have really suffered from the multi-layered impacts of the pandemic. So it has been good to be able to continue to provide strong and consistent academic and social emotional support. I hope you will enjoy the next few minutes as you see and hear directly from some of our students, parents, and faculty members about the positive and profound impact Horizons at SHU provides our students.
I learned a lot of things in Horizons that we haven't learned yet in school. And I learned the meaning of being a community and how to have fun while learning. But I feel like coming to Horizons, it's not just like being around friends, it's like being around family and a whole community of happiness, and you feel really welcomed and loved.
One of the biggest differences that Horizons makes is that we make a 12-year commitment to each student. So children enroll when they're finishing their kindergarten year, and they stick with us all the way through 8th grade. And at that point, they have the opportunity to participate in the high school program, and that carries them all the way through 12th grade.
So I started in kindergarten. Her principal at that time, she's like, I have this wonderful program. I think so I would be a good fit. I knew this is where I wanted her to be. For everything they told me that day, I knew this is where I wanted her to be.
It's very important that kids are bridging that gap between one school year to another, and they're keeping up with the things that they've learned and the things that they could use a little extra help on. That's important.
after her kindergarten summer here, she went to the first grade, and her teacher sent me a note, and she said, we tested at the beginning of the year to see where our kids are. She said, I don't know where Sarai is. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, she's off the charts.
They don't get this stuff in their regular school. They don't get this stuff in other camps and programs. We don't just focus on academics. Kids are able to join in on sports, on instruments. We've done singing, dancing, martial arts.
We really think through helping kids have opportunities to practice citizenship, what it means to be a part of a community. So at Horizons, we work really hard to provide kind of a restorative community, the kind of community that makes kids feel like, oh, this is what it should look like. This is how citizens should behave. This is how we get along, or this is how we disagree, and still be friends at the end of the day, or at least see the experiences of our neighbors.
Because of Horizons, kids are no longer saying, I can't. Kids are no longer saying, I don't know what that is. I've never experienced that before. Kids are now saying, I will. Kids are now having the opportunity to go forth and do things they never thought they could.
They make me look forward to coming every summer, and just being around all the teachers and the staff and all the assistants. It's just really, really happy.
I say, Sarai, do you remember when you first came to Horizons? I actually said this to her last summer. And she said, yeah. I said, do you even think you're that same person? She was like, no. And the way she said no was the confirmation. She didn't say no. She said, no, I'm not. I'm a totally different person, and I like who I am. And I love that.
Wow, that video is such a powerful representation of the incredible work Horizons at Sacred Heart does each year, and why I'm inspired to give to Horizons at SHU. As many of you know, this luncheon is a cornerstone of our fundraising efforts, so any support means so much to the students that we serve. I've made my own contribution and invite you now to join me. As Frank said, there's no Horizons at SHU without you. Normally at this point in the luncheon, I'm telling people to put their phones away, but today I'm saying this would be a great time for you to be on your phone, to text the word lunch21 to 41444, or use the QR code on the program card in your lunch bags to make a contribution. That's text the word lunch21 to 41444. Your support today and throughout the year makes our work possible and enables us to level the playing field for the wonderful, smart, intellectually curious, full of potential children that we serve. Before I close, I'd like to say congratulations to Frank on the Pioneer Award. You most certainly deserve it. I hope all of you will join Frank, Brad, and the rest of the board to support Horizons. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and your generosity and belief in our mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Hi, I'm Cassie Means again. And I'm overwhelmed. Just everything. Dr. Pugh was amazing. I'm a little bit of a neuroscience pocket protector person myself, and he was incredibly inspiring and made us understand how much, how important our work here is. So, Sandy, when you were speaking, I got out my phone and texted a donation, and I know Alyssa did too because she was texting me. So, but before we let you all go, we do want to do the raffle poll and see who the lucky winners are. We appreciate our team, that the luncheon committee that really worked hard to come up with some terrific raffle prizes for you. So, Alyssa's going to start us off.
All right. So for our first raffle prize, we have the Pamper Yourself package. Pamper yourself with this marvelous assortment of some of life's sweetest pleasures. This package includes a $100 gift card from Corrine's Flower Shop in a large, lovely lantern holder, a $50 gift card from Saugatuck Sweets, and a Brett Lauren bracelet. And the winner is Kristen Hathaway.
Yay, Kristen! The second package will be called Bonda and Baubles. Enjoy a lovely dinner at Bonda while looking especially lovely in your very own Brett Lauren bracelet. So that it includes a $100 gift card to Bonda Restaurant and a Brett Lauren bracelet. And it was generously donated by Bonda Restaurant and Finley Shaw. And the lucky winner is Marin Hood. Yay!
Our next gift item is the private book club for 10. You and 9 friends will each receive copies of Good Morning America's book club pick Last Summer at the Golden Hotel by Alyssa Friedland, so that you are prepared when the author joins your group, in person if possible, to help guide your discussion. We've given you each a copy of the book. This will be a great opportunity to meet this well-respected author. This gift was given by Finley's Fiction, Finley Shaw, and Elisa Friedman. And this goes to, the winner is Megan White.
The next one we call Date Night. So treat yourself to an especially sweet evening out that features tickets to Doubt, a Parable in November at the Westport Playhouse, Dave's Paletas, and treats from Saugatuck Sweets. A Brett Lauren bracelet will ensure you look and feel most glamorous on your evening out. Includes 2 tickets to Doubt, a Parable in November, 4 paletas from Dave's Paletas, a $10 gift card from Saugatuck Sweets, and a Brett Lauren bracelet, and generously donated by the Westport Playhouse, Dave's Paletas, Finley Shaw, and Saugatuck Sweets. And the winner is Jim Moy.
Our next raffle prize is the Host the Perfect Party package. Celebrate a special event or just gather some friends with all you need to host the finest party. We will supply the wine and a custom prepared sweet or savory charcuterie board. You provide the friends. This package includes a $200 gift card to the Grapevine, a gift card for a sweet or savory all aboard charcuterie board for 4 to 6 people, and a $100 gift card to Doc James Cigar Lounge. This was all generously donated by Francesca and Mark Martellota, all aboard charcuterie boards, the Grapevine, and Vortec Construction. And the winner is Ali DiVincenzo.
The next package we termed Fine Dining. So treat yourself to an outing at one of the area's finest restaurants. With New England-inspired American cuisine with an emphasis on farm-to-table approach, Artisan Restaurant truly offers a one-of-a-kind experience. So it includes a $300 gift card to Artisan Restaurant. It was generously donated by Artisan. And our winner today is Mead Fogel.
Our next raffle prize is all of your favorite treats in one. Make life a bit tastier with this delicious assortment of some of all of the area's most favorite sweet and savory treats. Includes 6 paletas from Dave's Paletas, which is 6 gift cards, 1 paleta per card, 4 $10 gift cards from Saugatuck Sweets, a $25 gift card from Fairfield and Greenwich Cheese Shop, and a $50 gift card from the Firehouse Deli. This was all generously donated by Dave's Paletas, Saugatuck Sweets, Firehouse Deli, and the Fairfield and Greenwich Cheese Company. And our lucky winner is Kim Proctor.
Our next package is called Look Good, Feel Good, because we all know if you feel good, you can look good. This marvelous assortment of healthy, feel-good items will help you look and feel like your very best self. So it includes 2 45-minute personal training sessions from AJ West Personal Training, 1 session at Westport Pilates, a handmade bracelet from Oat Energy, a 3-pack of services from Longevity Westport, including a DEXA scan, a resting metabolic rate test, and a VO2 max test, and a curated branded pail of specialty sticks, butters, and snacks, along with other goodies from Field Trip Snacks Westport. It was generously donated by AJ West Personal Training, Oat Energy, Longevity Westport, Field Trip Snacks Westport, and Brad Evans. And our lucky winner is Finley Shaw.
Our next prize gives you all the Sacred Heart University swag you could ever want and more. Capture the Sacred Heart University spirit with this top-rated collection of SHU branded merchandise. Go Pioneers! This package includes 2 tickets to the SHU Community Theater in downtown Fairfield, 4 tickets to a SHU basketball game in a tote bag containing a visor, a cap, a shirt, a tumbler. The list goes on. Enjoy. This was generously donated by Sacred Heart University and Sacred Heart University Athletics. This prize goes to Katie Rippey.
Woo! And finally, we've got Horizons at SHU swag because, of course, you've got to celebrate your Horizons at Sacred Heart University pride with this terrific collection of Horizons at Sacred Heart branded items, which includes a quarter zip sweater, a drawstring bag, baseball t-shirt, a pen and bound notebook, and an I Love Horizons button. Because don't we all love Horizons? And it was, of course, generously donated by Horizons at Sacred Heart University. And the winner of this package is MJ Berrien.
Cheers to all the raffle winners. And cheers to all of you. We so appreciate you being with us today as we celebrate our 10th anniversary and raise critical funds for Horizons at Sacred Heart University. In fact, thanks to you and the donations that have been made here today, we have already raised almost $75,000, with more than $60,000 in just donations. Wow. Thank you so much for helping us serve the children of Bridgeport. There is still time to help us meet our fundraising goals. So if you haven't given yet, we hope you will consider making a gift to support our important work. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon. And don't forget, there is no Horizons at SHU without you.